They have full-time jobs and they do this as their extracurricular. And so when we take those people and we bring them in with their many talents, with their many varied experiences, that we use their skills that they've already acquired and we figure out how to best utilize them within the organization. Where the National Guard would primarily have your 18 to 25 year olds as their primary demographic of service. Ours is a little bit older.
I would concur with that. And not only would I concur with that statement about a more experienced body of personnel, we also have a more flexible body of personnel. If you're in the National Guard and you get called out, you have to stop what you're doing in your civilian life. You have to give orders to your company saying, I'm being called up. And the legality of calling up a National Guard member, it usually takes 72 hours. I can't call up an armory and say, I want everybody to report to the armory in an hour. The National Guard doesn't work that way. There's laws, there's regulations, there's pay statements, there's paperwork that needs to be done. However, if there's a hurricane that hits the state of Georgia, I can call a State Defense Force member and say, I need you in an hour to report on what's happening in your area. I still work full-time. I have a full-time job. I would tell you that a good number of members of the State Defense Force have full-time jobs. But I also would tell you that I have a lot of retirees. I have a lot of individuals that have swing shifts, that are sheriffs, that are police department personnel that work night shifts and are available during the day. So I have a wide variety of people I can call on, and I don't need 72 hours to be ready. I need about 4 hours to be ready, and I need about an hour to 2 hours to get them to where they need to be. For the last 5 hurricanes that have hit the state of Georgia, that were major hurricanes that did damage, the first member on the ground reporting back to a state center location, GEMA, Georgia Emergency Management, the first people reporting were State Defense Force personnel. The sheriffs, the first responders, they are too busy on the ground rendering aid right away. They're worried about their city, their state, and their county. And they don't have the time to report up to FEMA and GEMA on what's happening. So I can call a State Defense Force member that is not necessarily right in the middle of that area, say, get in your car, drive over there, get on a radio, which we provide radio communication, or get on a cell phone, and we have priority phone calling, and report back to the state central group what needs to be done. We have been on the ground first. We, the Georgia State Defense Force, have been on the ground first for every single emergency since I have been with the State Defense Force, which is about 6-7 years.
What is the special training or the missions that the Georgia State Defense Force trains for?
So we have 3 groups of missions that we train for. We train for military support, where we support the National Guard getting ready to deploy. We do OPFOR or training, where we will come into some of the local military bases. Georgia has quite a few military bases: Fort Stewart, Fort Benning. We have Fort Gordon and Augusta. We have training locations for both Air Force, Air Guard, and the National Guard. And we will go with them and be the opposing force. We will be the villagers they have to interrogate. We will be the villagers that attack them, or the convoy that they have to stop. So we volunteer to do that. We have members that we actually have an organization called OPFOR, which is one of our command groupings of folks that want to do that mission. We provide military to military support, mill to mill. So the National Guard will say, we have a unit deploying to Afghanistan. We need to train them up. This is the training cycle. We need you guys for a week to be the opposing force. That's one of the missions we have. A second mission we have is a civilian to civilian mission. That's when a civilian location, whether it be a police, sheriff, county, needs help with something, and they don't have the resources to do it themselves or the specialty to do it themselves. Let's say an elderly person gets lost in the woods and they have gone through the resources they have and they need some more manpower. Well, they will come up to the state and ask the state, we need resources. And the state will come down to the state defense forces. Do you have people in that area that can help? And then we'll provide support to that sheriff or that police. In some instances, they need help with crowd control, such as a major event like the Super Bowl, and we'll provide support to that. So we'll do civilian support. We'll also do support to FEMA and FEMA agencies when FEMA comes to the National Guard and says we need support. And we'll talk about the COVID missions, which is the state of Georgia, did bring on several National Guard units and members, hundreds of them, to support COVID support around the state. But there was so much need that the National Guard couldn't cover it all. Plus, the National Guard was only allowed by presidential order and by the governor to bring on so many headcount because that's what they could pay for. So we're the extra expanded force for the National Guard, providing support, in this case, in food banks, in decon missions for nursing homes, in assistance to medical facilities, entry to medical facilities, doing screening to entry, building mortuary trailers for expanded capabilities for hospitals, and many other activities that we were asked to do.
Let's go into that then. Let's talk about some of the specific missions that your team accomplished. Now, I know that you received an award, the Georgia Distinguished Unit Ribbon, and if you can tell us a little bit about that.
The Georgia State Defense Force received the first ever Georgia Distinguished Unit Ribbon that the Defense Force has ever received. This was a state award, not a Defense Force award. So there's different types of awards you can get in the military. You can get federal awards if you're a federal person. I got a lot of fruit salad on my uniform from federal ribbons. But our state defense force is so well embedded into the National Guard and into the support of the state that we have direct support both to the governor, to the TAG, and to the citizens through FEMA of the state. And in this particular case, the National Guard saw fit to give us a state joint unit ribbon for all the support we provided. The State Defense Force is expected to be a force that will come on the ground and support the state for 72 hours. Let's go back to the hurricane. It takes the National Guard 72 hours to get activated, to get on the ground somewhere. So the State Defense Force here in the state of Georgia is expected to cover from 0 to 72 hours. That's our surge. A lot of our people work full time. They can't afford, we don't get paid when we're doing State Defense Force stuff. Other states, like the state of California, actually pay their State Defense Force members. In the state of Georgia, everything we do is 100% voluntary, is 100% internal cost. Now, we do pay sometimes for travel, for hotel, for lodging, for food, or provide that more likely than pay for it. But when I take off from work, I'm not getting paid. No one's paying me to do that. I am volunteering my leave days to go do that. So we're expected to come on board and handle things for 72 hours, maybe another 24 to 48 after that. But that's all we're expected. That's the anticipation of the State Defense Force. However, during the COVID missions, the State Defense Force was activated for 124 days straight. We had members in the State Defense Force for over 4 months working COVID missions every single day. Now, we were able to do that because several of our State Defense Force members lost their jobs. So they volunteered their time to their community. We had other members that took off from their jobs to provide support. So we had 124 straight days, more than 9,000 man hours of support to the state at no cost to the state or the federal government. We supported over 30 missions, some of those missions being considerably long, 60 days long, at food banks, at cleaning of nursing homes, going from nursing home to nursing home. The National Guard would do the actual inside disinfecting, but when they came out, we would do all the decon. At food banks, we would literally go to the food banks, help the food banks One, we would organize them a little better because they were all volunteers and they didn't really know how to do things in a more organized, quicker fashion. So we would just provide command support, but then we'd also provide personnel support, filling bags, unloading, loading. So we did all of this last year, giving us an amazing support to the state and to the nation because no one had to pay for it. No tax dollars. And like I said, that was the longest activation of the State Defense Force ever in the history of the State Defense Force. We provided more man days, more man hours in 1 year ever than we had ever done before. And we had an outstanding support from more than 300 active members of the State Defense Force and over 400 members of the Medical Reserve Corps, which we rolled into the State Defense Force for the period of time of last year.
That's amazing. That's a lot of work and a lot of organization. And you rely really heavily on a strong command staff to make something like that happen, to organize that. How is the Georgia State Defense Force organized? Are you in brigades? Are you battalions? How many units do you have that serve?
So we're just like the National Guard or any military organization. We have a headquarters element. I'm the commanding general. I have a G staff, a G1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. For civilians, that would be an HR person, an operations person, a logistics person. So I have a staff that works for me. Currently today, we work out of Dobbins Air Reserve Base. On the other side, where the Clay National Guard Center, where the National Guard headquarters is, we're on the base with the National Guard next to their headquarters. We have a building there. My command staff and I work out of there. We have brigades that cover the state of Georgia. We have 4 active brigades today from north to south. The state of Georgia is relatively large. It takes you 4+ hours to get from one end to the other. So we have brigades in different sections. Some of these brigades are rather large and have battalions underneath them. Some of the brigades actually, even though we call them brigades, are rather small in our rural communities where we don't have as many volunteers as we'd like. But we subdivide in brigades. We also have a support brigade, a medical group, an engineering group, a legal group, a chaplain group. They're all in our support brigade. So we have 5 distinct brigades. We also have an Op 4. Currently, it's not really a brigade or a battalion, but right now we have 4, and I'll call them infantry brigades, and 1 support brigade. So that'd give us 5 brigades. We have somewhere around 400 people on our register as State Defense Force members. We have 400 Medical Reserve Corps members that are on our State Defense Force books right now, but we'll be rolling them off after this pandemic. We're just being used as a conduit of command and control for them. And out of the 400 on our rolls, I would say we have 300 to 350 active participating State Defense Force members. And that increases and decreases depending on what's going on in the economy. And, our biggest job is to try to continue to increase the recruiting to get people into our community and into our product.
Do you have a maximum authorized strength for the Georgia
we'll
State
never
Defense
reach
Force?
that. Our governor wants us to double in size. Our governor wants us to get to 800 to 1,200 folks. We would love to get there. We'd love to compete with Texas and California. But in state size, Georgia is the 8th largest state with population in the United States. We, however, are the 3rd largest, competing with South Carolina and Tennessee, State Defense Force. We're the 3rd largest behind California and Texas. If you count our MRC folks, our Medical Reserve Corps folks that we added, that puts us around 800 folks, which would put us the 3rd largest State Defense Force, even though we're the 8th largest state in population.
Understood.
But our real numbers are around 350, 400. We'd like to get that 350, 400. We'd love to get that up to 800 to 1,000, but I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if there's enough volunteerism within the state of Georgia that we'll be able to get there. But I'd love to try, and that's one reason I'm on your podcast. Well, I want you to spread the word.
Well, that's what we're doing here today, sir. So speaking of new members, what are the entry requirements? What does somebody have to do or be to be eligible to join the Georgia State Defense Force?
We are looking for all styles, types, shapes,